and our hope. Amen. Just imagine it. Sorry, I know this is church, but you're going to have to use your imagination. Just imagine being one of Peter, James, or John. Or just imagine being one of the other disciples or the other followers who were with Jesus that day. When Jesus says, hey, you guys, we're going up the mountain, you might say, hey, what about me? You might follow along afterwards, maybe just see what's going on. And so you get to experience this moment too. Just imagine this moment, though. You're on top of a mountain, and suddenly Jesus lights up. What do you make of that? And then, wait, there's more, because suddenly it looks like Jesus is talking to Moses and Elijah, who have been dead for a very, very long time. How do you feel witnessing this? See, Peter's response is to, let's mark the occasion. Let's build something. Well, mark the occasion, and you guys can sit in there, like, it'll be really cool. This is awesome. And then a cloud, the biblical symbol of God's presence, and a voice saying, this is my beloved Son. How are you feeling? Excited? This is super cool. Read this story before, so I knew it was going to happen. I'm kind of bored now. Do you see this moment? This is a fantastic theater moment, right? You could really CGI something special here. And if you saw my post about this morning the other day on Facebook, it was Gandalf, right? If you saw the Lord of the Rings movies, Gandalf reappears in a blaze of light, and coincidentally to 3 of the other characters. It's just like Jesus. Which is not surprising, because we can all do that. I'll come back to that in a second. But how are you feeling witnessing this? You're probably going to be scared like the other guys. Although, conveniently, they weren't scared until the voice of God was heard. You know, the thing that would make things really different. Then they head off down the hill, and Jesus says, don't tell anybody. How are you feeling about that? What? Are you kidding? Not tell anyone? What are you kidding? We're going to tell everyone. No, you're not, says Jesus. Don't tell anyone until after my really super big moment. What are you talking about, Jesus? Well, you'll see. But just don't tell anyone. You'll know when it's the right time to tell people. But why? Why would we keep this from people? This would be the moment where we could convince people that you are something unique and special, that you are from God. You are the Son of God. This would be a great opportunity. Exactly, says Jesus. Exactly my point. If you tell everyone about how this happened, first of all, half of them aren't going to believe you anyway. But if you tell people about how this happened in this big moment, people are going to think I'm something special and different and unique. But you are, Jesus. You are. Yeah, but I'm trying to show you guys how to live. If you make me look like something special and unique right now, no one's going to think they can do that. They're going to all think that Jesus, he's way up here, like I could never do that. And my point is, yes, you can. I'm trying to show you how you can. I'm trying to show you how you can all love and care for each other just like me, because that same divine light that you just saw, that's in all of you. No, Jesus. We can't do this stuff. Like you doing cool like miracles and things. But the thing about a miracle is that it's a thing that you can't possibly comprehend how it could happen. Just if everybody behaved in a loving, caring, considerate, compassionate way with each other, wouldn't that create a world that you can't possibly conceive of ever happening? Exactly. That's the point. It'd be a miracle, wouldn't it? When you can do. If the point of my life, Jesus might say, is to show you how to live with each other, to show you the love of God, intimately show you the love of God at work in the world, and that you can do it too. Think of how easy it would be for people to say, I can't, because I'm not Jesus. And then it's already over. If you've already decided you can't, I'm done. But wait on this story, because something even way more miraculous than this story is going to happen. And that is going to remind you about how God is always with you, that I am always with you, that same love and grace and compassion can't be killed. Then you can tell people this story about how you witnessed the divine light, the divine spirit that's in all of us. But Jesus, you are, like we saw that. We witnessed it. How can we possibly just keep this to ourselves? You're trying to show people that this is in everyone and that everyone can love and care for each other. But think of the power that would give you to change things. We could change everybody. We could do amazing stuff if you just use that same power and just change No. Jesus, I think, would say no. You're missing the point. In order for us to love each other, in order for us to connect with each other, in order for us to build relationships with each other, it requires not power over the other person to change them. It requires changing you. It requires making you understand that your biggest superpower is vulnerability. In order to love, in order to show grace and compassion, in order to show empathy for another person, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be open to that other person. But we're going to get hurt. At the very least, Jesus, at the very least, we're going to get hurt. At the worst, you've met the Romans, right? But maybe that's not going to change the moment right now, although it can. But imagine how it will change everyone if we could all find a way into that vulnerability, understanding that it's our strength, not our weakness. That being open to others is worth it. Even if there are moments of hurt, even if there are moments that break us, the spirit of life is still there. It is still in you. It is still with you. It is still in all things. It's still connecting us. The way to open to that is to be vulnerable. It's powerful. It gives us empathy for others. It gives us understanding. It gives us a willingness to let go of the idea that we can have power over other people and instead make it with them. Think of how easy it is already to say, I'm not Jesus, so I can't do that. That's easy to push Jesus away. It's easy to put Jesus up on a pedestal like we do quite often with so many and say, I can't possibly be that. I am not worthy. Yes, you are. That's the whole point of the stories of Jesus' life, is how often he sits down with people who feel like they are not worthy and helps them understand they are. Who heals, the moments Jesus heals people who feel broken. Or at least starts them on the road to healing by helping them understand they are worthy just as they are. That the Spirit of God is alive in them. We don't see vulnerability as a strength. It's a weakness, isn't it? We see it as a weakness because it leaves us open, and that makes us weak. We are open to attack. We are open to hurt. We are open to allowing ourselves to be broken. That surely must be a weakness. That makes loving people a weakness. That makes having compassion for others a weakness. That means offering others grace and forgiveness is a weakness. Jesus' whole life is trying to make the point that it isn't. That it's not a weakness. All of those things are strengths. If we could find our way into living those things in the world and sharing them with each other. That's how we build community. That's how we ensure that people feel they belong and are not just welcomed, but affirmed for who they are. And feel like they belong not just because they fit in, but because they bring something. If we're not open to that, if we're not letting ourselves be vulnerable to that, we're not creating an opportunity for relationship or connection. In fact, we are doing our best to break the essential connection that binds us all. The Spirit, the love of God. God, however you understand that, we are connected. It requires us to be open. It requires vulnerability. Like most people, I'm not really a super expert or anything on vulnerability. I think it's really hard for any of us to say that. But here's a short video clip from somebody who kind of is. Brené Brown is a lecturer, an author, researcher who's done extensive work in looking at things like empathy and vulnerability and leadership and how these things are connected. So here's Brené with a few thoughts about the power of vulnerability.
So I think the biggest myth about vulnerability is that it's weakness. I think a lot of people were raised to believe that. It was modeled, I think, certainly in our culture. We see that a lot, that to be vulnerable, to be open, to be exposed is to be weak. And the truth is, what I found in my research is that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, I would argue that it's our greatest measure of courage. When we went out and asked people, what is vulnerability? We heard things like, vulnerability is the first date after my divorce. Vulnerability is starting my own company. Vulnerability is taking responsibility for something that went wrong at work. Vulnerability is sitting with my wife who has stage 3 breast cancer and making plans for our young kids. Vulnerability is taking my business public. The definition I use in my work of vulnerability is simply uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Vulnerability is about the willingness to show up and to be seen even when there are no guarantees. And it's interesting to me, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I gave a talk it's probably a couple years now, and it was being translated by people doing American Sign Language. And they came up before the talk started, and they said, are there any words that you're going to use a lot in your talk that we should know about that or might be different? And I said, well, I use the word vulnerability a lot. And there were two of them, and they kind of looked at each other and they said, oh, we do this for vulnerability. And I said, what does that mean? They said, it means weak in the knees. And I'm like, wow, that's not how I talk about vulnerability. And she said, well, there's only one other sign for vulnerability. And I said, what is it? And she said, and I said, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And so to me, vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. I mean, it's pretty powerful when I have 13,000 pieces of data collected over 12 years that I cannot find a single incident or story of courage that was not completely underpinned by vulnerability. I think the problem arises that there's so many little paradoxes with vulnerability, and one of them is that vulnerability is courage in you, but weakness in me. When I meet you, it's the first thing I look for in you, but it's the last thing I want to show you in me. And so I think to really put ourselves out there, knowing that if we do that enough, we're going to fail, I just don't think it gets more courageous than that.